Hi friends, how are you? I'm Nicole and this is Crimes with Cole. So, hello. How are you guys doing? I hope you guys are all doing well and are ready for another true crime case. In today's story, we will be talking about how this girl had trusted our justice system. She trusted the police, to be specific, to carry out their job of protecting and serving us as citizens. But they didn't believe her. But what if they had? What if just one of the police officers that came across this case believed her and questioned everyone else? How different her life would have been. Today, we will be talking about the case of Rachel Timmerman. Rachel was adopted by a couple named Tim and Lynn Timmerman in Cedar Springs, Michigan, and she grew up there with her sister Sarah and her brother Shane. In 1996, when Rachel was just 16, she had received the news that she was pregnant. And like most young couples who end up getting pregnant, the father of Rachel's baby was not in the picture. And I think because of how willing Rachel was to step up to the plate and put, on her big girl pants, and everything just really worked out nicely for her. I don't think the baby's father was a horrible guy who just, ran off and disappeared. I think he was just young and, things just didn't work out, and he did, what most young guys do, and he just got out of the picture. But that didn't stop Rachel from being an amazing mother to this baby. And she had her parents, of course, and although she was young, they were excited and very supportive because they were getting ready to get a grandbaby. So on June 15th, 1996, a few months after Rachel had turned 17, she gave birth to a baby girl, naming her Shannon. And the family fell in love. I mean, it was love at first sight when they had laid eyes on this baby girl. They ended up nicknaming her Lil Pumpkin and felt beyond blessed that their daughter was healthy, their grandbaby was healthy and beautiful, and really just cherished what life had brought them. A few months later, in August of 1996, Rachel was invited to go hang out with a guy named Wayne Davis, who was friends with one of Rachel's classmates, Mikey Gabrin. And I think, like any young mother or any mother at all, the weight of motherhood, those first few months really take a hit on you, and it's nice to just get out for a few hours, and it's just to be you again and not have a baby on you 24/7. So as much as Rachel loved Shannon, she did deserve a little bit of time to herself and decided to go hang out and play some cards with friends from school. Now, Wayne was a little bit older than Mikey and Rachel, but he was a longtime friend of the family, so it wasn't weird for her to hang around him. While Wayne and Mikey arrived to pick up Rachel, they had Mikey's uncle Marvin with them, who was 43 years old. At first, this sort of took Rachel back a little bit because they never mentioned Mikey's uncle would be there, but she didn't think much about it and just got in the car anyways. I mean, maybe they were going to go drop Marvin off somewhere, for all she knew. Hours later, Sarah, Rachel's sister, woke up to a loud noise that she had heard coming from outside. She got out of bed and went to open the front door to see what it was, and when she did, she saw Rachel standing at the front door with a hammer in her hand, just shocked, and had a cut across her nose that was actively bleeding. Rachel pushed past Sarah and slamming the front door behind her. Meanwhile, Sarah caught word of a man with a deep voice in the background shouting that Rachel would pay for what she had done. As soon as the door shut, somebody started banging on the door, and Rachel starts screaming for them to just leave her alone and go away. The banging stopped, and when it did, Sarah was just confused and trying to make sense of what just happened to her sister. While Rachel was scared and trying to make sense of everything herself, Sarah kept asking, "What happened, Rachel? What happened?" And this is when Rachel told Sarah that Mikey, Wayne, and Marvin had all came to pick Rachel up because Wayne, Mikey, and Rachel were all going to go play cards. However, Marvin kicked Wayne and Mikey out of the car, then drove Rachel to a secluded area. This is when Marvin had beat Rachel, sexually assaulted her 3 times, and her cut on her nose is from Marvin biting her. Marvin then threatens her that if she tells anyone, he would take her life along with her baby, who's only 2 months old at this point. And Rachel is 17 years old. I mean, most of us naturally are gullible at 17, but when you are put in this situation, I mean, how do you not believe him? She knew she needed to go to the police, but she truly felt Marvin was going to take her life if she did. Look at what he had just done. So Sarah, along with the rest of Rachel's family, knew that Rachel was scared, but this was something that she just could not put off. You have to go report this. So the next morning, they did. They went down to the police station to report Marvin's attack on Rachel, and sadly, the police didn't do their job. After listening to Rachel's side of the event, they reached out to Marvin and asked him what had happened. And Marvin said that Rachel got in the car and started coming on to him. That she openly said how she wanted to go down on this older man and perform oral favors on him. And that basically everyone in the car kind of agreed that, Mikey and Wayne would get out of the car so Marvin and Rachel could drive up the street and have relations with one another. He told the police in detail how Rachel was begging for him to have his way with her. But of course he refused because he's a gentleman. And then Rachel took his semen and rubbed it all over her vagina, just begging for it. He then proceeds to say that after everything was said and done, they were driving back, but the car broke down. And so they both got out to see what the problem was. And when Rachel got out of the car, she slipped on something, busting her nose against the car. This is what caused the cut on her nose. He said that she didn't realize it was bleeding until he dropped her off. And at that point, she started panicking and screaming. And while you and I are asking ourselves who would buy that story, that's very elaborate, well, the police did. The police believed Marvin. They believed that this 17-year-old girl was just throwing herself at this 43-year-old man. And the police just kind of left it in the air. They didn't arrest Marvin, yet I personally think they probably we're stringing Rachel's family along just to shut them up, but that's just my opinion. And for 6 months, this went on. For 6 months, Rachel mentally was just, this poor girl was losing her mind. Because remember, Marvin said he was going to come after her and her baby. And you have to remember, she is 17. So naturally, she has wild hormones. She just had a baby 2 months ago before all of this had happened. So there's more crazy hormones. And now she's dealing with the trauma of this attack, which I can't even imagine what that feels like. But that's a lot. That is a lot. And it certainly took a toll on Rachel in every aspect of her life. She wasn't the same happy, good-going Rachel anymore. Now she was depressed. She was scared, paranoid, never wanted to leave the house. She had nightmares all the time. She pushed away anyone that was close to her. When I say it took a toll on her, this poor girl. And then to cope with all of the mental effects, she turned to drugs. and got arrested once or twice for it. It was just such a dark time in her life. So as much as Rachel loved baby Shannon, she made the difficult decision to send Shannon to live with her paternal grandparents. And I think it is safe to say that that probably was a good decision because Rachel was not in the shape to take care of a baby at this time. I mean, I think she probably needed a lot of help that I'm sure her family was trying to give her, but I think mentally she was broken at this point in her life. I think this broke her, and she was trying to use drinking and drugs as a band-aid to heal this wound. And as we all know, neither of those heal wounds, they just infect them. Shortly after Rachel had sent baby Shannon to live with her grandparents, Rachel ended up getting arrested for probation violation and was sentenced to jail. And during her time in jail was when Marvin was finally arrested for the attack on Rachel. He was arrested in January of 1997. However, that feeling of justice starting to be served was short-lived because 2 weeks later, Marvin was released on bail, and all those unsafe feelings Rachel previously had came swarming back, drowning her once again. However, Rachel did agree to testify against Marvin in June of 1997 when his trial would start, and so did Wayne, which was great because then it would go to show that Rachel didn't come on to Marvin like this thirsty girl he claimed to be. But Mikey did not want to testify against Marvin, and I'm going to assume that is because it is his uncle. I don't know for sure, but Mikey wasn't picking sides. Now on February 13th, just 10 days after Marvin was released on bail, Wayne was due to go to court for a DUI charge. He obviously wasn't allowed to drive because of the DUI, so Wayne's friend Darlene was going to give him a ride to court that day. Now, leading up to his court date, Wayne was talking to Darlene, telling her he just doesn't think he's going to beat the charges. He thinks he's probably going to have to do some jail time because, he just didn't get the lucky hand this time around. So he was expecting to go to jail for at least 90 days for this DUI charge after court that day. And, he was fine with that. I mean, he kind of had the mindset that he made his bed and now he had to lie in it, and he was okay with that. So the night before Wayne's court date, on February 12th, Darlene came over, just to hang out with Wayne before he went to court because remember, everybody, they're all anticipating he's going to jail right after he's called into court that next morning. However, when Darlene got there, she was so shocked to see Marvin there. Because remember, Wayne had agreed to testify against Marvin in his upcoming trial that June. So why is Marvin over at Wayne's place? It was odd. It was very odd. So, I mean, she didn't say anything, and the three of them just kind of hung out and sat around. Darlene left and planned to be there that next morning to take Wayne to court like she had said she would, except when she got there and knocked on the door, no one answered. So she called a few times. It went straight to voicemail, so she would knock again, and then finally, she just left. She couldn't get a hold of Wayne, so she left. But she just had this weird feeling. It was just something wasn't right about this. So, she drove back by his house a couple more times throughout the day. Calling, still getting no answer, knocking on the door, no one comes and answers. And eventually, she just came to the conclusion that maybe Wayne changed his mind. Maybe he changed his mind last minute and he doesn't want to go to jail. Maybe he decided he's just going to skip his court date. So after 2 whole days go by, Darlene decided to stop by Wayne's place one more time. See if maybe he would answer her this time. Except when she got there, she found a note on the door. And the note read, "Gone to California, scared to go to jail." Darlene was confused because Wayne in no way seemed to be scared to serve his 90 days. So she called the police to let them know and asked if they could check it out and see if they could find anything, because something did not feel right. She felt like something had happened to Wayne because this just wasn't like him, and the police just kind of blew it off. They didn't think too much of it, but Darlene was persistent, and she knew something happened to Wayne. He didn't just leave a note on the door, skip court, and go to California. And why would he even put where he was going in the first place on the note for everyone to see that was posted on his door? Like, it didn't make sense. So Darlene decided, since the police weren't going to do anything, she was. So she found her way into Wayne's place and started snooping around. And what she noticed was nothing had been touched. Nothing looked like it had been packed up. I mean, his favorite army jacket he wore all the time was still hanging up by the door. Now, if Wayne would have truly left, he would have grabbed a few things to take with him, but nothing was out of place. She had also learned that his bank accounts were untouched. No large amounts of money were taken out months prior or anything strange. It just didn't add up for Darlene. He was okay serving his 90 days. Then all of a sudden, Marvin is hanging out with him the night before court, and then he just vanishes and isn't heard from, yet leaves this note on his front door without taking any of his belongings. It was just odd. Now, around this time, Rachel was released herself from jail because, remember, she was arrested on drug-related charges, and then, Marvin was arrested for his attack on her, but he was let out on bail 2 weeks later. So when Rachel was finally released on May 5th, she had this new mindset. I think being in jail for a little bit really helped her in the sense of, one, getting off drugs to suppress her issues, but maybe also kind of realize she had to do something if she plans on getting through this. She can't just sit there and be scared and expect it to all go away. So she grabbed the bull by the horns and started working on herself when she got out. She started working on the relationships with those who love her and support her that she kind of damaged when she was in her dark state of mind. She arranged for baby Shannon to come back home and was really just wanting to better herself and heal. She wanted to heal from this. She wanted to truly heal, and she was ready to testify against Marvin in June. With Marvin's trial a month away, Rachel had ironically bumped into him twice. And she knew this wasn't a coincidence. She knew Marvin was keeping tabs on her and following her, so she went to the police both times and reported it. Because although she was determined to testify, she was still scared that Marvin was going to hurt her and her baby. And she even told the police that. She said she was coming in so that there would be a paper trail in case Marvin actually carried out his threats and the police didn't think anything of it. Imagine being this girl who keeps getting dismissed by the police. She is finally overcoming some of her own mental struggles to put this man behind bars, and you just know something bad is going to happen to you. And you ask the police for help, and they don't care. They just don't care. But Rachel stayed positive. She kept telling herself that the trial would soon start, she'll get on the stand and testify, and he'll go to prison. Then this nightmare will be on the downslope, and she'll be able to start to really heal at that point. On June 1997, this is the month of the trial. The trial is supposed to begin. Rachel had decided that she was going to go on a date. So she got ready. She did her hair, put on her makeup and a cute little outfit, and she told her parents that she was going to go out on this date. And they were happy for her. After all she had been through, after the mental battles she faced, which then turned into dependency on substances, just the entire roller coaster of the last year and how far she had came. They were just so excited for her to go out and have a good time and start living her life again. So her parents offered to watch baby Shannon, but Rachel actually said no. She was taking baby Shannon with her. That her date didn't mind, and so she was just going to take Shannon along. And I know that kind of sounds odd. I guess some people do it, but her parents didn't think too much of it. She was only going to be gone a couple hours, and, so she grabbed baby Shannon and she heads out the door. 2 hours later, Rachel's dad, Tim, started getting concerned because, she said she was going to be back in a few hours and she wasn't. So he stayed up and waited for her until he finally had passed out. But when he woke up the next morning on June 4th, he found a note by the front door. It was a note from Rachel in Rachel's handwriting, stating that she and baby Shannon were going on a vacation. You can imagine her parents' reactions. Any parent with a 17, 18-year-old with a 1-year-old baby are absolutely going to be like, oh, you're just going on vacation by yourself with your baby. Like, they would probably, there would be shock, right? Like, you would be very shocked just by the fact that you're going to take a spontaneous vacation with a baby. But add Rachel's situation into the mix, and now you have a girl who has just been through hell, getting ready to testify against her attacker, just got her baby back however many weeks ago. She had worked so hard to start healing and putting life back, the relationships that were destroyed, and now out of the blue you want to take a vacation with your baby. Like, do you see how beyond shocking that is? Like, no bags were packed. She hadn't called off work. I mean, this was not planned. It was just weird. It was just very weird. That just isn't something that Rachel would have done. But her parents knew they couldn't go to the police because, the police had done nothing for the last almost a year. All of this had been going on. She's an adult taking her own daughter on a vacation and wrote you a note saying so. So after the parents kind of realized how the police would approach the situation, they just realized that, the police would be looking at it as it's a, young adult taking her baby on a vacation. And, they may be right. Maybe she did just want to get out of town for a day or two. She was due to testify against Marvin in a couple days, so maybe she needed a breather. So her parents just waited for her to call or show up at home. But when the day of the trial came, they knew for certain she would be there. They headed down to the courthouse and they waited, staring at the clock until the time came for the trial to begin, except Rachel never showed up, and neither did Wayne. So at this point, the prosecution had no choice but to drop the charges because they had no one to testify against Marvin. For 11 more days, Rachel's parents just waited for Rachel and baby Shannon to come home. And during those 11 days, they received 4 more handwritten letters from Rachel. 2 were addressed to Tim, Rachel's dad, and the other 2 were addressed to the prosecution. In the letters written to Tim, the first one said how, Rachel had fallen in love and was going to marry this man she met and would be gone for a few more weeks, but promises to come back home after those few weeks were up. The second one sort of contradicted the first letter and basically said that she's never coming back home, like ever. And instead, she's moving to Little Rock. She's marrying the man of her dreams, and this man's name is Delbert. The letters to the prosecution were somewhat of like a confession. They said that, Marvin had never assaulted her and that she came on to him and she wanted to have relations, but Marvin didn't, just like Marvin had claimed, and that Rachel was the one who created the bruises on her body, and that Marvin's puppy was the reason she had that huge gash on her nose. She also stated that she did indeed rub Marvin's semen on her vagina to make it look like she had been assaulted. And that Delbert, this man of her dreams, was a God-fearing Christian and told her that she needed to come clean with all of this and that she couldn't stand the thought of locking up an innocent man. And the prosecution didn't believe this one bit. They were confused because Rachel was so determined to put Marvin in prison for what he had done. And nobody was putting anything together. They just kept telling themselves none of this made sense. All the pieces were right there, but none of it made sense to them. They just assumed, since it was Rachel's handwriting, it must have been Rachel. So there was nothing stating Rachel was missing. No one searching for her. She just left. And this went on until July 5th of 1997. A little over a month that Rachel was last seen when a group of fishermen were out on Oxford Lake and they found a body floating. The body had duct tape around their eyes and mouth and had chains wrapped around it. And the chains were still attached to cinder blocks. It was badly decomposed and very obvious this was a brutal murder. Where this body was found was put in a very specific spot. So whoever put this body here knew this lake. And they didn't want this body to be found. But the problem with our bodies is that after we pass, our bodies fill up with gas. Gas is going to make the body float. But the location was in the water is where plants were on like the top of the water, almost like growing out of the water. So it was very like you couldn't get like a boat back there. Like you would have had to have like walked and like pushed everything out of your way and things like that. Like that's where the body was. So it was deliberately put there in this specific location, making it difficult for anyone to get to. During the autopsy, it was discovered that this was indeed Rachel, and her cause of death was drowning. But they also discovered that she was in fact tied up and had chains around her and then was thrown into the lake. However, baby Shannon was nowhere to be found, and they searched the lake, the surrounding land, and the woods, and there was no sign of her. The police decided that they were going to take a closer look at Marvin once they discovered that this was indeed Rachel. While Rachel was missing, Marvin had actually attacked someone else, causing the police to bring him in for questioning about that attack. But they figured since Marvin was going to be at the police station anyways, to go ahead and question him about Rachel and her death, because Marvin was the one who Rachel was leaving a paper trail on. So when the police arrived at Marvin's house with an arrest warrant, shockingly, he was not there. So they decided to go back and get a search warrant this time so that they could search Marvin's house. And lo and behold, they found cinder blocks that matched the cinder blocks that were wrapped around Rachel. These cinder blocks at Marvin's house had like tar and paint on them, as well as the cinder blocks attached to Rachel. That's how they knew. The police also found a key to a padlock that was used to lock the chains on Rachel. So this was it for the police. I mean, they were going to bring Marvin in and charge him. They just had to find him first. Luckily, Mikey, Marvin's nephew, had a change of heart once he found out that Rachel's body had been found, but baby Shannon was still missing. So Mikey told the police everything he knew about his uncle and also informed them that there was a campsite that Marvin would always go to and offered to take the police there. When the police arrived at the campsite, they did not find Marvin, but they did look in his tent. And what they found was duct tape, bolt cutters, and chains. They also found a woman's hair clip and the nipple off of a baby bottle. They started asking everyone around the campsite if they had noticed anything odd. And then they started asking his neighbors at his house if they've seen anything. And what they ended up discovering was that Marvin had this handyman named John. So they tried to track down John, but they had no luck. However, they did get in contact with John's girlfriend, and she said that she hadn't seen John in 2 whole weeks. They showed the girlfriend a picture of Marvin, and she recognized him, but he didn't call himself Marvin. He called himself Lance. And the last time she saw John, he had left with Lance. But we're just going to refer to him as Marvin. She had caught John on the phone with Rachel a few times, and anytime she confronted John about this alleged affair, he denied it. And he told his girlfriend that Marvin was the one interested in this girl, and John was just basically setting them up. On June 22nd, 15 days after Rachel went missing, John told his girlfriend that he and Marvin were going on a dope run. And this run would be 7 to 10 days long. They had to go to Texas, but after those 7 to 10 days had came and gone, his girlfriend was getting worried. She called Marvin and asked, where they were. Like, it had been longer than 10 days. What's wrong? And Marvin simply told her that John met up with some people he knew in Arizona and asked Marvin to drop him off there. The police also caught wind of some other things that had happened close to the date of Rachel's disappearance. The neighbors said that they heard a loud bang sound at 4 a.m. and saw him dragging his boat up, like cleaning it out and rinsing it off. When the FBI joined the case, they told the police that Marvin actually had another identity. He was going off of the name Robert Allen, except Robert Allen was an actual person. The real Robert Allen actually owned a house that Marvin was living in. And he was supposedly a mentally ill man and ended up living on the streets and then went missing in the summer of 1995. But that gave Marvin the opportunity to cash in on the real Robert's Social Security checks, get a driver license in his name, and also get a Social Security card in his name. Marvin also had a bank account and 2 P.O. boxes in Robert's name as well. And once the police and FBI caught wind of this, they headed to New York, where the bank was located, and just staked out until Marvin showed up to cash those checks. And in October of 1997, they caught Marvin leaving the post office and arrested him. But they had to arrest him on Social Security fraud and not the murder of Rachel. The police were going to obtain a hair sample to match it to the hair that was found on Rachel's body, but Marvin had completely shaved his head and his groin area. The police didn't care. They just waited for his hair to grow back, long enough so that they could collect a sample. And when they finally got their hair sample, they discovered that it did not match the hair sample found on Rachel. The police interrogated him, but he just kept saying how he was innocent and had nothing to do with it. It wasn't until he got back around the other inmates that he would start openly bragging about how he had took Rachel's life and baby Shannon's life. He told the inmates how he wanted to punish Rachel for going to the police about the sexual assault. He also said how there was a body in Oxford Lake, which is where Rachel was found. He also made the comment that the only reason he took baby Shannon's life is because he didn't know what else to do with it. Like, he would refer to baby Shannon as an it, not a little girl, not a baby, but just an it. So with all of these confessions he was giving to other inmates, Marvin was indicted. In June 1999, trial was set for March 2000. The prosecution had brought in 58 different witnesses to really show how Marvin was as a person. It did not paint the best picture for Marvin. His defense team came back proving that the hair sample from Marvin did not match the hair found on Rachel's body. They also had brought in an employee from where the padlock and key were purchased, and come to find out that key that they had found in Marvin's house that matched the lock found on Rachel's body, anyone who had purchased that particular set of lock and keys could have had like a match, meaning not every padlock comes with a different set of keys. They're like created the same in like batches, like a huge batch will all match, and then the second batch will be a different key. There was also no fingerprints to be found on any evidence that matched Marvin's fingerprints. They even tested the duct tape that was over Rachel's eyes and mouth and the duct tape from the campsite and still didn't find fingerprints on them. But Marvin, being the bright shining star he is, he decided to get on the stand himself, and when he did, he completely changed his story. He told the courtroom that he was just there when Rachel was thrown into the lake, but he was just like a bystander. He had nothing to do with it. It was all John and this other guy named Eddie. Said it was Eddie who put the duct tape on Rachel and wrapped her up in the chains, that Eddie had a cabin near the lake, and that is where they went to go take Rachel's, life. And then they drove to Philadelphia to drop off baby Shannon with an adoptive family. When Marvin was asked if he had any remorse for what he had done, he replied that it was the prosecution's fault this happened. They shouldn't have forced Rachel to testify against him for attacking her. And because of that, it caused her to become a victim to a crime. That's what he said. When Marvin had gotten down off the stand, he had gone over and just punched his attorney in the face. He didn't like his team. I don't know why, but he could not stand his defense team. The jury took 4 hours to deliberate and came back with a verdict that Marvin was guilty. Marvin was given the death penalty, and while this seems like it is the best choice in his situation, Rachel's parents felt differently. They didn't buy the story that Marvin had dropped baby Shannon off with some adoptive family. They believed that baby Shannon was no longer alive, and they just wanted her remains so that they could lay her and Rachel to rest together. Marvin had given someone a map of the lake right before his trial had begun, and on this map there were 3 red X's in Marvin's handwriting. The first X was for Rachel, another X was for Wayne. Remember Wayne, who was supposedly went to California? He was another X. And the last X, they think, was for baby Shannon, but to this day, baby Shannon still hasn't been found. The 2 other people who went missing, John and Robert Allen, they have never been found either. The police believe that John was the mystery date that Rachel was going out with that night, and that he had led her right to Marvin so Marvin could get rid of her. They also believe Marvin had something to do with the disappearance of John, and it's almost like anyone who came across Marvin who was going to do wrong by him ended up going missing. But, as for now, Marvin sits on death row, and Rachel's family has mixed emotions, as I think a lot of us, we do about death row. I mean, which is worst? Sitting there knowing the clock is going to stop ticking because you have a legit expiration date approaching, or is it worse to just have to write it out in prison until the day you do pass? Having to constantly deal with being in prison and just the anxiety and constantly looking over your shoulder, that type of feeling. I don't know. You'll have to let me know which one you think is really worse. That is all I have for today. So you'll have to let me know what you think. And until next time, please remember to be safe, and I will see you then. Bye.